What's good, Orange Nation? This is Neil Adler with the latest episode of Syracuse Central via the Fan Arch Network, and we're going to do some Syracuse football and recruiting today. We're going to start off because it's the biggest storyline of the week and frankly, the biggest storyline of preseason camp so far for the Orange. Fran Brown, the head coach, second year for Syracuse, named Steve Angeli, the Notre Dame transfer, as his starting quarterback for the 2025 season. And I wasn't terribly surprised by the move, even though Fran Brown had named the LSU transfer Ricky Collins as the starting quarterback for the 2025 season in April. That was before Angeli transferred from Notre Dame to Syracuse. So once Angeli transferred, we knew we were going to have a heated quarterback competition for the signal calling job for the Orange. Um, Angeli's got a bit more college experience. He's a poised pocket passer, maybe not as athletic as Ricky Collins, maybe not arm strength. Both of them are solid. Maybe Collins has a little bit stronger arm, but Angeli is a leader, and I found that interesting. And Fran Brown earlier this week, after word broke that Angeli would be the starter QB1. Fran had a press conference, talked with members of the media after a practice. This was on Monday. And, he spoke to the closeness of this battle. And, he respects Ricky Collins, and Ricky Collins is going to keep working, even though he's not going to be the starter. You never know what could happen in football and sports. There's injuries, etc. We don't want that, but you never know. But Fran, he talked about Steve Angeli, learning the system well, even though he came aboard in the spring, whereas Ricky Collins came aboard during the winter portal window. But Fran talked about Steve's leadership. And that's not to say that Ricky's not a leader. This isn't a dig at Ricky Collins. This is just this is what Fran said about his QB1. He said Steve Angeli, works hard at, establishing, forging, always strengthening relationships with other players. He's just poised. He's a leader of this team, even though he hasn't even played one official snap for this team. But that's common in the transfer portal area anyway. But Angeli, he just Fran Brown just had a lot of positive things to say about him and his leadership skills. But he also said, look, we're one play away from Ricky Collins being our guy. And of course, we don't want Steve Angeli to get injured. We don't want him to underperform. We want him to rock and roll and Syracuse to start off week one and kick Tennessee's butt, and have a great season, even with that daunting schedule. So, we'll see how this all plays out. I'm happy for Steve, as I mentioned yesterday on the show. I feel for Ricky because he was named the starter, but that was before Angeli transferred, and it's a business, and it is what it is, and he'll have his shot. He's a year younger than Angeli, so he'll have his shot at Syracuse or somewhere else if he does transfer. I don't want him to, but right now Steve Angeli is the guy, and I think he's gonna play well. It's tough to try and replace Kyle McCord, who threw for over 4,700 passing yards last year, set ACC and Syracuse football program records. So how do you, and is in the NFL now, trying to make the Philadelphia Eagles final roster. How do you fill that void? How do you replace Kyle McCord? I think for Angeli, he wants to not just be like a game manager. He wants to throw touchdowns and score points and all that, but just try and be yourself. Don't try and be Kyle McCord. Don't try and be Ricky Collins, because Ricky Collins is more of a dual threat quarterback than Angeli. But look, Angeli came in when Riley Leonard went down, and I've talked about this before. When he went down he didn't go down, but he was in the concussion protocol in the college football playoff, one of the semifinal games when Notre Dame played Penn State. And so Riley Leonard went down. It was like pretty late in the second quarter, I believe, and Angeli came in, and he Penn State was winning 10-0, and Notre Dame needed a score before half to kind of get some momentum going. And Angeli, I think he went 6 of 7 for 44, 45 yards. 44 would be appropriate. That's on brand. And they got into field goal range. They kicked a field goal. That was a nice little momentum boost, and then they ended up winning the game. I think it was 27-24 at the end of the game. And they went to the title game and lost to Ohio State. But so Angeli has definitely a bit more real-time college experience than Ricky Collins. And He's is he the safer choice? I guess you could put it that way. He's got more veteran leadership at this point. And so that's who Fran Brown is rolling with, and it's fine. I respect it. Fran knows what he's doing. Obviously, he consults with, the offensive coordinator Jeff Nixon and quarterback coach Nunzio Campanelli. And by the way, Steve Angeli played for Nunzio's brother at his New Jersey high school. Back in the day. So, not that that had anything to do with him winning the starting job. Absolutely not. It just means that he's familiar with the Campanellis. He's familiar with Nunzio. Nunzio's familiar with him. Kind of like when Kyle McCord transferred from Ohio State after the 2023 season when he went 11-1, and he transfers to Syracuse, which has a new first time head coach, Fran Brown, and a lot of these talking heads, some of whom frankly don't do their homework, are saying, head scratcher, why is Kyle McCord transferring to Syracuse? Syracuse isn't a very relevant program, and he went in 11-1. Well, if you did your homework, yeah, I get where you're saying in terms of like recent history with Syracuse, the program, but Kyle McCord's known Fran Brown for years. He's known Campanelli for years. He's known Jeff Nixon for years. They're all from New Jersey, or a lot of them are from New Jersey. Kyle McCord played for a Philadelphia prep school, but he's from New Jersey. So is Fran Brown. So is Elijah Robinson. So is Nunzio Campanelli. I can't remember if Jeff Nixon is or not. I believe he is, because he's known Nixon, and I think Jeff Nixon's son, I hope I'm getting this right, played like prep, or not prep school, but like Pee Wee football with Kyle. My point is this. The Syracuse staff felt very comfortable with Kyle and vice versa because of those long-standing relationships. And that could be the case with Steve Angeli. I don't know how long, like, before high school, like if he knew the Campanellis or other Syracuse coaches like in middle school. I personally don't know that. I guess I could probably look it up right now, but I'm not going to. My point here is that there's a rapport, there's relationships, there's a comfort level, and like I said, Ricky Collins is going to get his shot. But for now, Steve Angeli's the guy, and with this wide receiver room and Dan Villari at tight end and the running backs, I'm excited about the running backs too. Yassine Willis and Will Nixon. I don't know that Syracuse is going to lead the country in passing yards again, but I think it could be a solid offense. And I think with this team, they might not have the same offensive firepower. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But hopefully the defense will be better, even though they've got a young secondary, and we're not sure how the defensive line and the offensive line, how they're going to fare, because there's a lot of turnover. But, we'll just see how it all goes. And again, the schedule is tough, but, I wasn't surprised by Angeli getting the nod, and, wishing Ricky Collins a successful season as well, even if he doesn't get a lot of snaps or any snaps. He'll learn under Steve Angeli and with Fran Brown and Nunzio Campanelli and the rest. And, they got two able quarterbacks, and I'll just leave this segment at this. Fran Brown said during the press conference, he said, look, anything could happen in football, and we're one play away from Ricky going in, and we feel very comfortable that if, God willing, if Ricky Collins Jr. had to go play because, there's an injury or whatever, and we don't want that, but the staff feels very comfortable, like it would be a seamless transition. It's not like they have a stud starting quarterback and then a lower level, just a backup that's nowhere near. These guys were like this. So I think the quarterback position, it might not be as strong as last year, but I don't think it's going to be a huge fall off either. So I'll leave it at that, and we're going to transition now to Demetrius Samuel Jr. This young man is a really interesting storyline, and I say that, of course, I'm biased. I host Syracuse Central. I write about Syracuse sports for other places as well. I'm an alum, so of course I have orange-colored glasses on to some extent. But even like a fan of just the sport in general, I think would be fascinated by Demetrius Samuel Jr. So he's a true freshman, and not only is he a true freshman, he is only 17 because he reclassified from the 2026 cycle to 2025 to join Syracuse this year. And he's only 17. SU Athletics not long ago put out a release about one of the preseason honors that Samuel got, was included for, and in it they noted that Samuel is the second youngest FBS player this year, I believe. And that's just wow. Okay, and then to top it off, Fran Brown and the coaching staff and all these pundits, like they're expecting big things out of Samuel, and he's a two-way player. So, so what I'm wanted to talk about here was a couple different things. Number one, Fran Brown, as he's discussing different position groups, and we don't have obviously a full depth chart for week one, but he did confirm that Demetrius Samuel will be one of the starting cornerbacks, which is pretty darn cool. And Brown reiterated that Samuel will get reps at wide receiver. How many reps? I don't know. They've got a nice wide receiver room, so we'll see about all that. But it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Samuel was a four-star recruit out of the 2025 class. He played at Heritage High School in Florida. Syracuse has done a fabulous job the last few cycles recruiting successfully Florida-based high school prospects. And Samuel, I believe it was yesterday. It was this week. I don't want to mess up dates here, but this week, one of the main media outlets, On3, put out their preseason true freshman All-America team, and Samuel was on it. And then I think it was last week, it was sometime recently, ESPN put out I believe it was their top 10 freshmen to watch. And Samuel was on that list as well. I think he was number 8. I'm just looking here at my notes, and yeah, it was number 8. Whatever, top 10. So big expectations for this young man. It's really cool. Is he going to be an all ACC performer at cornerback? I don't know. That's a lot of pressure to put on a 17-year-old. But the fact that he's starting at cornerback, and will be getting, assumably, reps at wide receiver as a 17-year-old, a true freshman and a young freshman, shows just how skilled he is and the confidence that Fran Brown and the staff have in him. So I'm excited to see Demetrius Samuel. He was like I said, a 4-star recruit. He was a top 250 national prospect. When he was in 2026, if memory serves correct, I'm just thinking through here, I feel like he was like a top 125, top 150 national prospect. A lot of times, or frankly, most times, if not all times, when you reclass, if you move up, your ranking's going to move down, if that makes sense, just because you're being ranked against older guys. But anyway, he's still a 4-star top 250 national prospect. They're expecting big things out of him, and it's pretty cool. So I'm happy for Demetrius Samuel Jr. We'll see. He's going to be thrown right into the fire, so to speak. They're playing Tennessee in week one. Tennessee, college football playoff participant last year, did lose a lot of production, just like Syracuse on both sides. They're going to have a good defense again. They've got a transfer quarterback starting for them, so that we'll see how that goes. I believe at last glance they were like a 13 to 14 point favorite against Syracuse in week one, Saturday, August 30th, from Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. So, odds are odds, whatever. But Samuel will be put to the test right away because Tennessee, I don't know if they'll have the same high-powered offense as they did last year. Although their offense wasn't like, I shouldn't say this because I don't know off the top of my head. I feel like their offense was solid, but their calling card has really been defense. But they're a really good SEC school, made the CFP. They're number 24 in the preseason AP Top 25 poll. I don't know if they're necessarily a huge contender for the CFP this year, and the SEC, of course, is stacked once again. With other teams, whether it's Texas at number 1, Georgia, Alabama. I mean, I could go on and on and on. Vanderbilt, they've got national title aspirations. I'm fond of Vanderbilt because my son primarily lives in Nashville, so root for the Commodores. But anyway, I'm running around in circles here. But Demetrius Samuel Jr., I think he's gonna be an impact player as a true freshman, a young freshman, and they're expecting big things out of him on the Hill. So we'll move from that to, we're going to talk a little recruiting here, this next segment. So Syracuse football in their 2026 class, which is pretty much wrapped up at this point, but you never know. There could be flips or whatever one way or another. Hopefully it's not away from Syracuse, but it's towards Syracuse. But they have 28 verbal pledges in this class, and the early signing period will be sometime in December, and that's when these verbal commits can put pen to paper, so to speak. So you always want to see if there's any buzz related to guys flipping away from Syracuse or to Syracuse, and I'll obviously be all over that over the next few months. But the 2026 class is really shaping up nicely. Now, I say that, and I don't want people to think, look, Syracuse football is on the up and up. They went 10-3 last year. They've got an exciting head coach. They've got a good staff. They're getting really good commits. I think even if Syracuse doesn't go 9-3 and then win a bowl game to go 10-3 this year, based on that schedule, if they beat some good teams and don't have any bad losses, regardless of what the overall record is, things will be continue to trend in a positive direction for this team, and momentum and the fan base excitement, et cetera, et cetera. But the 2026 recruiting class is shaping up really nicely. ESPN, one of the three, there's three main recruiting services that I focus on when I talk about recruits at this point, because On3 and Rivals merged. So at this point, you look at ESPN, then you look at Rivals, which is part of On3, but Rivals does the high school, the recruiting stuff. So ESPN, Rivals, and 24/7 Sports. And ESPN recently updated their class rankings for 2026, and Syracuse was number 23. And that's pretty comparable with the other ones. Before I came on today, I wanted to just check the other main ones, and Syracuse is 23 at 24/7 Sports, actually the 24/7 Sports composite. And then the Rivals industry ranking, which is another composite service put out by Rivals, they're 28th. So they're hovering between the 20, the mid 20s to, inside the top 30. Could they go higher than that? Possible. I guess a couple things would have to come into play. Number one, they got to hold on to all their highly ranked commits. And when I talk about highly ranked commits, we're talking 5-star wide receiver Calvin Russell. We're talking 4-star edges Cameron Wilson and Jarius Rogers, 4-star offensive tackle Javion Cooper, as well as 4-star wide receiver Amari Goff. All those guys except for Amari are from Florida. Amari is from the Richmond, Virginia area. So they got to hold on to those guys without question. And Russell and some of the other Florida guys are going to get, continue to be pursued. I'm talking about Russell in the next segment, but they're all going to continue to be pursued by other suitors, whether it's in Florida or elsewhere. It's just the nature of recruiting. And I think the other thing, so they hold on to those guys, that'd be great. Another thing that I would look at is Syracuse, they have a lot of guys. I mean, predominantly it's a 28-person class right now, and you've got a handful that are 4 stars and 1 5-star. So the rest of them are 3 stars. So it's predominantly 3 stars. But if I'm understanding recruiting rankings, and, hopefully I am, that's never 100% given. Some of these guys are high 3 stars, and they're nationally ranked, whether it's in the top 400, 500, 800, whatever. My point here is that if some of these dudes have killer senior years, and I mean that in a positive way, if they have strong senior seasons, maybe some of them move up to 4 stars and move into like the top 300 of the national rankings or whatever, just keep moving up. And if you've got some of those guys moving up, or guys that are mid or lower 3 stars move up to high 3, just if guys have good senior years and move up even further, that pushes the overall average ranking of the class up higher. And so maybe it could get into the top 20. I don't think it's going to go really any higher than that. Again, I hope I'm wrong, but they're still pretty far behind a lot of the heavyweight programs. But historically speaking, this could easily be the best class Syracuse football puts together in the modern era, which is like, dating back to the early 2000s when the recruiting services really started doing stuff like over the internet, which is kind of what I focus on. So we'll see. But right now, like I said, number 23 at ESPN, multiple 4 stars, 1 5-star. And, in terms of potential guys that might, commit to Syracuse at this point, there's not a lot going on. I mentioned, I believe yesterday or earlier this week, to Darius Cuse, who plays at Miami Northwestern with Calvin Russell and some other Syracuse targets, and he was spotted in a preseason game wearing Syracuse football gloves. Does that mean he's going to flip? I don't know. I wouldn't say that. But he's high on Syracuse. He's officially visited. So is he on flip watch? Again, I don't know about that, but certainly if a guy like him committed, he's a top 300 national prospect, if my memory serves correct. So that could elevate their class up. There's not a lot else. I'm not hearing a lot of chatter right now with 2026 otherwise. But, again, we're finishing up summer and we'll see what happens in the fall. But for right now, it's still trending as the number one class in the modern recruiting era for Syracuse football. So that's good. I mean, they're trending in the right direction. So we'll end today's show talking about a 2026 verbal pledge, and that's Calvin Russell, who I've talked a lot on this show since we debuted it last week. I acknowledge that, but and I don't want to overdo it, but when I see things, read things, hear things, I want to pass it along because Calvin Russell is the highest rated verbal commit for Syracuse football in more than 20 years. And as I mentioned the other day, he picked Syracuse over Oregon, Florida State, and Michigan. And then he had a top 12 that included his hometown Miami and a bunch of other, really good programs. And the other thing I'd say about that is he, over the summer and late spring and this summer, he officially visited a lot of those schools. I don't know if it was all the schools in his top 12. I don't want to overstate it, but a lot of them. And he didn't officially visit Syracuse football. He's visited Syracuse unofficially multiple times. And towards the end, for a while, LSU had buzz and Miami, and then Michigan had the buzz, and then it was like back and forth on the day he verbally committed to Syracuse. It was like this back and forth stuff with Michigan, Syracuse. Who the heck knows behind the scenes? I'm not privy to that. If I was, I'd share. But Syracuse, that was a huge recruiting win for them. He's a top 25 national prospect according to 24/7 Sports. I believe over the Rivals industry ranking, I think he's like 28th, but 5 stars, so top 30. He's expected to play for Syracuse basketball, or at least give it a shot that first year. He could enroll at Syracuse in January, an early enrollment, and he's expected to sign during the early signing period in December. But analysts in recent weeks continue to talk about how some of his other suitors, whether it's a Michigan, a hometown Miami, maybe a Florida State, another Florida, based school, they're going to continue to push for him. And so does that make me nervous? Maybe a little. Does that make Syracuse football fans, recruiting enthusiasts nervous? Sure, maybe a little bit. It's natural. I get it. But there was an article from, I believe it was Rivals. I think it was actually John Garcia, who's a Syracuse alum and really plugged in. I would definitely give John a follow and check out his stuff. So I hope I got that right, but I'm pretty sure it was a Rivals article, and it was from earlier this week. And Calvin said, "Look, I've got Miami, Florida State, Michigan. They're still there, but the bottom line is," he said, "everyone knows I'm locked into Syracuse." Okay, that's good. Does that mean that he's going to ultimately sign with Syracuse during the early signing period? I hope so. I guess things happen, stuff happens, but he did mention to Rivals that I think he's going to go to the Miami Notre Dame game, but that doesn't necessarily, I mean, he could go check out, have game day unofficial visits to suitors or whatever. He's got former teammates that play for, some of these college programs, or just people that he's boys with, he's friends with. I wouldn't read too much into that. I think he also is going to take, I haven't been told this directly, but what I've read about and people have, kind of speculated and assumed is that since he hasn't officially visited Syracuse, he will likely officially visit Syracuse sometime this fall. And again, at the end of this article, he said, "Look, Miami's doing a good job, some of these other guys, but I'm locked into Syracuse at the end of the day." That's the bottom line. So, it could be some nervousness over the next few months until he officially signs, but he committed to Syracuse, and he reportedly got a nice NIL deal and all that jazz. So, but I mean, he's made very clear, and I believe it was his agency, his talent agency, is someone was quoted, I think, to Syracuse.com, or it was in some article I read right around his commit. They said, "Look, money's great and all that, and I get it's a new era of college sports with NIL and revenue sharing, but Calvin committed to Syracuse because of his relationship and his family's relationship with Fran Brown. That was the deciding factor. He could have probably gone to Michigan or some of these other schools and made more in NIL, at least initially. But Fran Brown developed the strongest relationship with Calvin and his family." Let me read this quote from the Rivals story. Coach Fran Brown is a great guy, a genuine guy. He knows what he's doing with the football program. He knows how to build up a man, and that's what I'm worried about. Building me up to become a man and do what I'm supposed to do. So could Calvin flip? Sure, he could. Stuff happens. Do I am I overly worried? No, because Syracuse has Fran Brown. Although, of course, some fans say, well, if Syracuse wins 10 games this year against that schedule, he's going to get an offer from a Big Ten or an SEC school and he'll be gone. I'm pretty sure Fran Brown said when he first was introduced that he was going to coach at Syracuse for life or 10 years or, some long period of time. All I got to say is if he keeps recruiting like this and winning games, John Wildhack locked this dude up for long term because Fran Brown is going to be highly sought after. He just bonds with the players well and the recruits, and he keeps it real. He's a man of faith. He calls it like he sees it. He seems like I don't know him personally. I've seen videos of him and press conferences on Zoom and stuff. But so I don't want to sit here and pretend I know him. There are certain people in the Syracuse, community that I know. I don't know Fran, but he seems genuine. He seems kind. He seems no nonsense, and recruits want to play for him. And if they keep winning, that'll just keep happening more and more. So ultimately, we'll see what happens with Calvin Russell. And if I hear things or read interviews that he's given that say anything concerning or positive or whatever, I'll continue to pass it along because this is a big recruiting story for Syracuse. And so I'm not overly worried. I think Calvin Russell will sign with Syracuse during the early signing period. He's going to play for Syracuse basketball as well, I've been told. Look for him to potentially enroll in January, and it's going to be awesome. Hopefully he'll recruit other high 4-stars and 5-stars to play with him, even if it's not in this 2026 class, which is wrapping up. Syracuse is heavily recruiting other guys from Florida in 2027 and 2028, including some of Calvin's teammates at Miami Northwestern. So landing Calvin was a huge recruiting win, and I think it'll only lead to more and more positive stuff. I'll leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed today's show. I'm Neil Adler. This is Syracuse Central via the Fan Arch Network. Thanks again for watching. Please feel free to leave comments, good or bad, in the comments section, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow. Take care, friends.